It's a fair warning for everyone. Just one moment. Okay, so as I say, welcome everyone to our visit next in the Centre for International Film Research visiting speaker series. Sorry, I'm sounding slightly flustered because I have just this moment lost my notes on the screen. Where have they gone? Too many different screens to try and juggle. Yes, so we have Professor Agnes Kapiochowska, who I'm very pleased to say is currently the Professor of Film and International Engagement at Gdańsk University in Poland, which is where she's currently joining us from tonight, but also has an illustrious history in UK academia and is about to start a position, I'm reliably informed, as professorial fellow in film at Oxford Brookes in the UK. Now, it's a great pleasure to welcome Agnieszka, who has many different publications on her name, including Film and Embodiment, and also the publication that tonight's talk is going to be taken from, which I'll just read out in a moment. But as well as this, what's so great about Agnieszka is that she's truly someone who, well, embodies the humanities in general, I think we might say, both a scholar but also a writer, and as well as that, a filmmaker. And you'll be able to see that from, I've had a sneak preview of the multimedial event that we're about to be treated to, so very much embodying that. And aside from anything else, posing questions as well about what practice-based research means for us, as well as the topic of tonight's talk, which is on the nasty, kind woman and female authorship in cinema and television. So Agnieszka will be talking to us for the first half of the allotted time today, and then there'll be plenty of time after that as well for conversation, for discussion, and so on. So Agnieszka, I will just get the PowerPoints set up correctly for you, and we're ready to start whenever you are.
So thank you so much, Louis. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you to everybody who is joining us this Tuesday afternoon. Also, it is actually my first outing in my new role as the research professor here at Gdańsk University. It has the situation, as I was saying to Louis, I was actually supposed to have been back to the UK today, but for various reasons I'm not. But we're still managing, and Louis very kindly is actually playing my presentation, because for whatever reason this brand new laptop is playing up slightly, but we're completely confident that this will work to a certain extent anyway. So Agnes Kapiochowska, clearly the name in it is Polish, so I am Polish, and it's amazing that I'm kind of back here doing other things and trying to, I think in some way I see my role in this country, in Poland, where I am, and at this university, as a sort of opening all kinds of possibilities for transdisciplinary research and collaborations. And in a way, I will be talking about it as well, because my first kind of discipline, or my first thing that I've been doing for many years is indeed making films, being a practitioner. And then I decided to do a PhD for complicated reasons, and my PhD was at Birkbeck. And I think there's probably some of this might be at the PowerPoint, so maybe we can show. But anyway, sort of late-ish in my career. So I worked as a filmmaker in the industry before doing the PhD, which was at Birkbeck, and was very, in a way, quite a traditional PhD. It was a theoretical PhD in psychoanalysis and ethics in documentary film. So I didn't make a film as part of it, but rather reflected and interrogated things. However, as sort of years went on, if we could maybe show the next slide, Louis?
Yep, just 1 second.
Or two. So as I sort of went on with my various academic adventures, now that's fine, I sort of started to realize that practice research, meaning making things, creating things, as well as writing about them, is in itself still a gesture of subversion to a certain extent. And that in some way, because there's obviously not the colleagues who are here tonight, but there are still people who believe that video essays and creative practice and making films is not really proper scholarship. So of course, being sort of wanting to try and be taken seriously, I've always done writing and traditional academic work as well as creating video essays and making films still. But in my mind, it somehow connects my creative practice work and creative practice research and the topic of this particular conversation today about the nasty woman and about female authorship. So let's have another look. Another essay, another slide. Yeah, so generally speaking, and this is the Married to the Eiffel Tower slide, so still probably people would know me for this film, which is sort of quite annoying because it's almost more than 10 years ago. But the point is, I think, that the character, the figure of a woman who in some way subverts the heteronormative, subverts the expectation and the patriarchal, it's something that I've been interested for a very long time, even before I became an academic. And certainly in terms of what we're looking at today, that's what I'm interested in. And I'm interested in the stories that we tell about women and about ourselves, and who tells these stories, and to what extent it is also possible to reframe various historical events and historical characters in different ways, and how that is incredibly important to how we perceive structures of power in culture and society, not only in cinema. This is basically what I believe in, and this is an ongoing project which, starting with these Married to the Eiffel Tower, through really my whole work, also including post-colonial and decolonial work in Zimbabwe. So let's have a quick look at what we've got there. Louis, if we keep going. Yes, these are the two new books that obviously one I'll be talking in particular, the creative practice one with lots of colleagues. I hope, and it's been fairly recently published, so I invite you all to consult it, because obviously I'm very proud of it. And the variety of other books, Louis, if you can just keep going to the next slide, which I'd edited and done as well. Black and White is a monograph, but again, there's a variety of films and practice work which goes with this monograph, because in fact my whole kind of work has been in this way, focusing particularly on gender, and in particular, I suppose, on female characters and female authorship. So, Nasty Woman. Since the book has been published maybe 18 months ago, and a lot of my doctoral students have been using it, had been using the idea of the nasty woman in cinema and female authorship as a character, as a figure, strong, powerful figure who is not compliant with expectations of the patriarchal systems, figure who does her own thing. She can be free sexually, maybe. She is successful and strong. She has adventures. But fundamentally, she's a good person. Fundamentally, she would love to be sweetness and light, but she can't, because the systems are in her way. This is kind of important to say. So she's not a nasty woman who, politically, I suppose my nasty woman is on the left, or left of center, not on the right, as you would expect me to say. But there's a problem I can see with the category and with the term, and I need to think about it some more, and I need to think about the kindness being more part of it, perhaps, but that's the project under construction. So why is it even that important to think about it and talk about it? There's nothing, let's have a look at the new slide. There's nothing particularly astonishing about nasty women generally in the history of cinema, except, and in the book, of course, I mentioned particularly femme fatale and then neo femme fatale. And there's nothing so astonishing, it seems, because in film noir, there was, of course, a figure of femme fatale who would be controversial, subversive, and would arrive in the narrative to offer ruptures, and sometimes incite the man to commit crimes. However, the big thing about the narrative and the big thing about the narrative structure that I would like you to consider and keep considering, that in these various traditional stories, these nasty women, these femme fatales, usually or always get killed off, or domesticated, or in some other way stop being so subversive. And consciously or otherwise, I would suggest very consciously, but many male writers, they become in some way disempowered, so that the power structures of cinema culture stays more or less the way it is. So nonetheless, I would argue, and many other people have argued, that film noir with femme fatale was still a useful thing to have had, because it offered a possibility of an opening of a different character. The slide here, it's something that I've made, which has been published fairly recently in Screenworks, which again, and this is a collaboration with a Zimbabwean writer, and this is an adaptation of his play in which the main character seeks justice, in a way, one could say, in this in the play. Anyway, let's have a look at the next slide. Yes, and again, this is another piece of work which I've made in another collaboration in Zimbabwe, which again explores, in fact, film noir, and there's an attempt to research, to investigate how possible it is to combine some of the ideas of African mythology with film noir. But I'm mentioning it in passing because I want to just talk about the video essays and the character of the nasty woman. So if we can look at the next slide. So in the exploration of the figure of the nasty woman and within the female authorship, I have created, apart from the filming pieces of work, I've also created a few video essays as well as writing about it. And some of them I'd like to share with you tonight, bits of. There's also going to be a new video essay which we'll show at the end of the talk. And also I want to reflect briefly about the issue of the fact that the real characters, real women, can be presented in very different ways. And that's in some way, this is why I would insist, it really is quite useful and worth thinking about and talking about, because it is very easy, and it appears tempting by the historian or storytellers to present characters of difficult women, or women who are simply not completely fitting into various boxes, in ways which again end up showing them as victims of various kinds. Anyway, so the first video essay is The Revenge of the Cool Girl. This is a piece of work which was published in a feminist magazine, a journal called Mike, which you may know. Let's have a look at some further slides. Okay, this just refers back to the figure of femme fatale. Okay, so The Revenge of the Cool Girl. So this also combines, I suppose, controversially, television and cinema. And in the way it's structured, it just makes some points which I've made already. I mean, I've looked at it recently. I still quite like it, but of course, I like it less than I used to like. It's a collaboration with another creative person who is a friend, and she is not here tonight because she's recently given birth to two girls. So she's very busy, but she's my long-term collaborator. She's an editor, Anna Dobrowolska, and this piece of work, if I may say so, is beautifully edited by her. So let's have a look. I mean, the main thing that the piece of work makes is that there's a possibility. I mean, the Gone Girl, and we know that Gone Girl as a piece of work is controversial, and some very established feminist scholars feel that it might be considered a misogynist piece of work because of the portrayal of violence. I would argue against it. I would argue that the violence is a phantasmatic violence, that's a metaphoric rage written by Gillian Flynn, as we know, because the book is based on the novel, and that if you compare that, even in terms of iconography, with a classic such as, for example, The Blue Velvet, then we'll see that some of the images are very similar, or at least not dissimilar. Nonetheless, the narrative, the story arc is different because the woman doesn't need to be rescued, is not raped, is not domesticated, is not subjugated. In fact, she literally does get away with murder. So also in the same video essay, I make a point of juxtaposing these images with some famous feminist texts, in particular Chantal Akerman. So the issue of the agency, which obviously to a certain extent is almost like obvious thing to say, why would I be saying it? But it still seems very important thing to be saying in terms of the grabbing hold of the rage and then finding a way of, in some way, presenting it in the narrative. And it seems that the female authorship, be it in terms of the Gillian Flynn's, I mean, you might say there's a curious example to give here, but there's a variety of other. There's Andrea Arnold in the video essay, and I've written about her work too, which I mentioned in passing. But the point is still that somehow, some way, maybe it is a transition period in which we grab hold of the rage metaphorically and then do something with it. And this is one of the examples of what I tried to do in this video essay. Louis, if we can play it a little bit.
Okay. Oops, sorry, it's just gone. Just give me 1 second.
And I think it's fine. If you play it, it'll work. You can maybe make the sound go.
I know you're scared, Sabrina, because all women are taught to fear power. Nick Dunn took my pride and my dignity and my hope and my money. He took and took from me until I no longer existed. That's murder. Let the punishment fit the crime. Nick loved a girl I was pretending to be. Cool girl.
I think there's possibly another clip, Louis.
Yeah, on the next slide. Shall I play this one?
Let's play this one.
Who are you?
I'm the guy to save you from all this awesomeness.
The speed limit in this state, Mr. Neff. 45 miles an hour.
How fast was I going, officer?
I'd say around 90.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm interested. I'm very interested in both the fact, and I do think that a video essay as a tool for exploration of these ideas, works well. I don't think necessarily that it works well on its own. I think it's, the sort of solid film analysis that a lot of colleagues do is incredibly useful still and will be. But it is quite nice and also useful for students to see clearly the similarities, the visual similarities in the various cinematic texts that I juxtapose, and yet in terms of the narrative arc, what different solutions people have found, and how particularly female authors have tried to explore ways of dealing with anger and revenge in a variety of different ways, which do not kill off the main character. And in this, I think we have the next slide. Andrea Arnold's film, Red Road. Let's just move on from Gone Girl. Yeah, I mean, this, I keep saying it because I think it's really important to my mind and interesting to think about Chantal Akerman's Jean Dielman, because, of course, mysteriously, as you may recall that film, there's the character sort of keeps repeating a variety of tasks, from peeling potatoes and making food, and then she has to be a sex worker to survive, and she does all these things until eventually she stops and she kills the client, the punter. Now, this is not the space to have a big discussion why she might kill him, and it would be very interesting to do so. But the fact of the matter is, there's an element of rage in this classic feminist film in which the filmmaker lets her character commit this crime, and yet nobody would dream of saying this is in some way misogynist text. I think there has to be differentiation between a metaphor of writing and an actual sort of saying, oh, this is a great thing, let's go and murder everybody. So we have to in some way begin to give expression of the rage. But that's not the only thing. So in Red Road, which I hope I have a slide on that, what is interesting with Andrea Arnold's work is that the main female character there, Jackie, she draws her as a sort of in a really interesting way, because Jackie does absolutely fit into the nasty woman sort of slot. She decides to do all kinds of dodgy and unethical things in terms of planning a revenge, planning to frame this man, but ends up somehow changing her mind, possibly because of the quality of her sexual connection with him, which comes unexpected to her. I mean, I think that this film, I remember a couple of years ago, I played a whole video essay at 9:30 in the morning with a huge sex scene between these two people, and everybody was very shocked. But what's really interesting is how boldly Andrea Arnold presents this strength, this erotic connection, which draws from a variety of traditions in French literature, but also, of course, Audre Lorde, which Louis, I might have a quote. Yeah, but maybe not. Let's have a look.
Someone's mic might be on as well. If everyone except for Agnes can mute themselves, that would be great.
Ole.
It's Louise. Is everything okay?
I think someone's mic is. I mean, I'm getting quite a lot of. Sorry. Has the slide moved on to Audre Lorde?
Yes, we have the Audre Lorde, and yes, it would be great if everybody could mute their mics. Is that what you were saying? Yeah.
I was trying to say that. I think I was slightly drowned out by the person who was unmuted. But yeah, I was trying to say if you could all please mute your mics, unless you know in the Q&A later when we'll be talking. But Agnieszka, please go ahead.
Yes. So I hope well, I was just making a point that in terms of Andrea Arnold's work, which is so, unusual always, and so original in so many ways. And in the Red Road, the Jackie really, she's in profound pain, of course, because of the loss she'd suffered. But in the first instance, the kind of solutions to her pain that she'd chosen, one would suggest, were not either ethical or nice or whatever, and she carries this out because she's trying to frame the man for rape. She carries out her plan, but then of course I would argue because of the strength of the sexual encounter, they don't go away and they don't get married and live happily ever after. However, something changes, I would argue, through that encounter, and she gives up on her revenge, and she, it's a very, I don't think I should offer the spoilers, but there's something different in terms of the quality of the thinking in that film that, as I say, Andrea Arnold offers in her own way, but drawing from long tradition of the of the erotic being something that the feminine can reclaim as well, which is another big project under construction, I would argue. Okay, so moving on to another video essay, which I've fairly recently done, was published a few months ago in the journal called Feminist Encounters, and with also an essay, 5,000 word essay, in which I compared 3 films by 3 from different historical moments in time, by 3 different writers, directors, different countries. And this is The Piano by Jane Campion, Fuga by Agnieszka Smoczyńska, Portrait of a Lady on Fire by Celine Sciamma. And the interesting thing to me is, I mean, there are some extraordinary similarities between the works, and we'll play a little bit of the video essay here, but you can go back and look at it yourselves. There's some really quite, again, in terms of iconography, imagery, it's interesting how the filmmakers draw from each other's work, and the solutions are different. And I would argue that, interestingly, Agnieszka Smoczyńska's work, Fuga, it comes up with the least usual and the most radical solution, because the main character does not succumb to the patriarchal at all, and in the end chooses a solution which is very difficult for her and very painful. So it's interesting that in the country which possibly arguably is the most traditional one currently, as we might know in terms of what's going on here, actually the filmmakers, the female filmmakers, the female authors are waging the war of some sort for ideas, for the minds. So let's have another look, and I think we can play a tiny bit of the video essay.
For Freud, woman's desire was an enigma. Writing to the French psychoanalyst Marie Bonaparte, he famously declared that the great question that has never been answered, and which I have not yet been able to answer, despite my 30 years of research into the feminine soul, is, what does a woman want? Best video essays rely on unspoken, intertextual, visual, and emotional connections. But here I've decided to spell things out for clarity. I'm exploring the notion of feminine desire through a juxtaposition of 3 films made by female filmmakers in different moments in time, in different countries, in different actual historical settings for their stories. Their heroines, in order to offer some resistance to the patriarchal, become quite nasty, a term coined in my academic work. The visual parallels between the 3 films are striking. In the 2 films out of the 3, one could say that the women succumb to the patriarchal in some ways. The third is the most radical, and that character is conceived in a film made in a most conservative country.
Okay, Okay, let's have another slide.
Woman's.
No. Yeah, so I sort of more or less said it. They all the work, all the films, the three films are transgressive and deal with kind of love and desire and disappointment, I guess, and betrayal. But it's only in the Fuga that the character explores these issues in ways which lead her out. I mean, we can argue about it, and I'm sure we will. But I just think it's very striking and interesting. In the essays also, which I won't have time on to explore some more today. In this particular video essay, I've also looked at the work. I mean, really sort of intertextuality, looking at work of Tokarczuk and looking at work on a little bit on other Polish writers and how they explored the notion of love and desire without succumbing, if you like, to the patriarchal expectation. Anyway, let's move on, Louis. Let's have a look at the next one. Okay, so now I'm moving into the section of the talk briefly before the very final video essay, which I'll show, which hadn't been published. So this had really made me think about the presentation of actual real female characters. And obviously there's huge amounts of them. So this is just a couple of things that I've been thinking about and how they've been presented and their representation in recent times. So one of them is Marie Colvin, and many of you would know, of course, that she was the American journalist who in 2012 was murdered by the Syrian regime whilst on assignment in Syria. And she'd been the subject of this particular film, which is a feature film with Rosamund Pike, as it happens, who of course was in Gone Girl. But also, if we move the slide, Louis, she was a subject of a variety of documentaries, even before she that's her in reality. This is the book written by Lindsay Hillsam, but also there's a variety of documentaries in which she participated as a real person. But then once she died, so she didn't have an opportunity to frame or reframe her own life as we all do all the time. So she couldn't reinvent herself. Of course, the issue of then how we tell stories about other people, and as you may know, my first discipline was documentary filmmaking. So that's very much an issue which has always been fascinating me, but particularly it's striking how the women, I mean, this book is written by a very established and excellent journalist, and she's a friend of Marie's, and the book is wonderful, except I would argue for the final stretch in which she frames her decision to go back to war, and which then resulted in Marie Colvin's death, as in some way precipitated by Marie Colvin's unfortunate love affair with Richard Flay. So let's have a look at the next. Yes, and so Lisa, when Lisa asked me to contribute to her book on transgressive figures in war, I was thinking I would like to write about Marie Colvin, and did also because I happen to know her, to have known her. I happen to have known her and indeed Richard Flay, who they're my neighbours, which sounds quite grand because we all live by the river. And somehow I just thought, my goodness, this is a completely different story that I remember. So it was very difficult to write it because I had to deploy the autoethnographic mode, and then had big discussions with Lisa Peirce, who was a fantastic editor, because we sort of wanted to find the right tone in which there would be the legend, the nasty woman, the hero, but a way in which I could also share my knowledge, imperfect and subjective and therefore subversive, of these people, However, it's still, I think, very useful to know. So I completely argue and take complete issue with this narrative that somehow she was a victim at any point, that somehow she was driven to be going to war and getting killed because she had a broken heart. No, she went to the war because she wanted to, because that's what she was about. She was the absolute free spirit to the end. And I think even in terms of her own legend, if you like, Marie Colvin legend, this is a better narrative. Okay, and the next, you tell me what you think. And the next slide, so this is the brand new thing that I've just watched here in Poland, which is about some other thing altogether. It's called Żeby nie było śladów, Leave No Traces is the translation, which is this famous story of the murder in 1983 of the young teenage boy called Grzegorz Przemyk. That's what the film is about. The film is this year's Poland's entry for Oscars. But what interested me in it is we're going to show you a tiny bit of a trailer for the film. But however, what interests me in it, as you wouldn't be surprised to hear, is the figure of the mother of the boy. And let's Louis, let's play the trailer. This is her.
Bo chyba pomyliło. Jestem świadkiem niepodejrzanym. A ja jestem prokuratorem i moim obowiązkiem.
Okay, and then let's have a play. Sorry, in the next slide, let's have a tiny bit of the actual archive footage of Barbara Sadowska. Let's have a look.
Byłam w klasie humanistycznej.
Okay, I mean, let's not play the sound. This is no subtitle. But so there's a couple of things I want to say here, and I think it's important to say that in terms of the representation of this character in the brand new feature film, which you may want to go and see, although it's extremely dark and brutal story. I'd be really interested in having conversation about it and about the representation of the mother. To my mind, that character is based on this archive footage that you can see here. But that archive footage, that whole interview is shot after after Barbara Sadowska had lost her son, after she'd been completely broken by the authorities, and she's very unwell in the clip, and then she does proceed to die soon after. So this is indeed the last moving image that we have of her. So the filmmaker, who is a really great filmmaker in many ways, has chosen to portray the character based on this snippet of the archive footage. Now, it's fine, but I would say it's not completely the whole story. And again, personally, so I've now read the book, obviously, about the whole thing, and spoke to the person who'd done incredible research into it and had a long conversation with him about the character of Barbara Sadowska. And Barbara Sadowska, as it happens, was born in France, had been an incredibly free spirit all her life, was an artist, tried to live her life very differently, really sort of in a non-patriarchal way. Her home was always open to everybody, and she was incredibly hospitable and kind, as well as having big parties. And yes, she liked, and she had many lovers who were younger than her. She was strong. She was a strong, powerful woman who, was broken by the murder of her son, yes, and maybe who wouldn't be. But I think it's incredibly unhelpful and unfair to represent her as a person, to my mind, as she's represented in the film. And so the stories, how we frame the narratives of real characters, even if they have tragic ends for whatever reason, I think is incredibly important to how we can define ourselves and who we are as people in ways which perhaps could be we could try harder this non-binary stuff is my view. So now this particular part of the presentation, which Louis has come to an end, and now what we're going to do is play a brand new video essay which has not been published. So are you still here?
Yes, I'm absolutely here. Just switching over between the two, which is going to take me a second. So if you please just bear with us, we're coming to the culminating grand finale, I feel. So
this is a piece of work which I think Louis is going to play one with credits, but in fact it's not completely finished and hasn't been published. And as you will see, I look at the promising young woman and I may destroy you. And I won't, and you will understand why I choose to juxtapose them in this way, and why I feel one is more patriarchal than the other. And maybe after that we could have a conversation about it. It's only 10 minutes long. Okay,
so hopefully you can see my screen. I'm sharing the screen now. Is that the case? And I will just maximize this.
Okay. I have some issue with mine. Can people see it?
Are people able to see my web browser?
I think if you could, yeah, now it's much better. Yes, grand, thank you.
Promising Young Woman is the recent Oscar-nominated and BAFTA award-winning feature film. It was written some time before the Me Too revelations and screened before the horror of the Sarah Everard kidnap, rape and murder in a leafy South London park in March 2021 by a policeman off duty. As we recall, the peaceful vigil demonstrators, mostly women, were treated brutally by the mostly male police. There was a public outcry, a demand for a change of culture, which is not about an odd, brutal incident, but rather about the daily instance of women being the object of male unwanted attention at best and pure systematic violence at worst. This is the important context in which Promising Young Woman should be viewed and regarded. The pre-title sequence of the film is fabulous. In it, Cassie, the main protagonist of the film,
Oh, apologies, it's just buffering.
Played by Carey Mulligan, is about to be sexually exploited by the nice, predatory man who pretends to take care of her when she appears drunk at a nightclub.
Don't worry. Yeah.
Oh, that's disgusting.
You're so beautiful.
In this already classic scene, he's touching her inappropriately as he's moving down on her in order to presumably indulge in non-consensual oral sex and then rape. He's proceeding with his movement down her body, and Cassie keeps protesting in an apparently semi-drunken and confused way, but clearly saying no.
What are you doing? Wait.
The suggestion of the film is that he ignores it because he can. Because, despite all the clear facts to the contrary, he might even be able to convince himself that she's somehow into it. As the viewer keeps watching, the scene has an air of an episode from a horror film.
Hey. I said, what are you doing?
Cassie's gaze, Medusa-like, freezes the man, and his desire to abuse the woman who, he does know at the very outset, was barely capable of any reaction. He realizes he was tricked.
He is disempowered and literally unveiled. The woman reclaims the power and, without any violence, manages to make the man feel small and repulsive as he is. She wins. We, the viewers, win too. Hope remains. Hope that it is but a question of a voice, of finding the right words at the right time, and all will be well. Not only in this story and in this film, but also in the world. However, as the film's narrative ensues, it becomes problematic. It is not because of some reviews questioning the credibility of the sequence of events, of Cassie's new partner, of her criminal actions, although one could criticize all of this. To my mind, the film becomes a patriarchal cinematic text, despite its best intentions, because its main character's narrative's journey replicates the violence of the patriarchal structures she's trying to defeat.
Oh, okay. Whoa, stop. Crazy fucking bitch. Excuse me?
As a direct result of her destructive and vengeful plan, Cassie succeeds in her revenge, but perishes herself. She dies. She's no more. That is what happens. This, I argue, feeds into a well-trodden path of the female character who challenges patriarchal system, but ends up being punished in the narrative of the cinematic story world. It is important to remember that the second-wave feminist film scholars of the 80s, including such giants as Elizabeth Cowie, Teresa de Lauretis, Judy Payne, and others, questioned whether it was possible at all to tell non-patriarchal stories, as all stories we are used to hearing are patriarchal. The nasty woman who breaks codes of behavior is not entirely a new invention. In the 40s and 50s, the genre called loosely film noir celebrated the femme fatale, a beautiful, sexy woman who appears to function in the narrative as a counterpoint to the compliant female character. Unfortunately, in these narratives, such a nasty woman would inevitably be either domesticated or would somehow die by the end of the movie. Their subversive nature had to be punished in order for the patriarchy to keep going, even in the storytelling. In more recent offerings in films authored by women, this pattern has been reversed, and the nasty woman can be unexpectedly nasty, but is not killed off by the filmmakers, such as, for example, Maya and Catherine Bigelow's Zero Dark 30, or Jackie and Andrea Arnold's Red Road, or Molly in Molly's Game, written and produced by women, even if directed by men, or I, Tanya, or in plethora of television detective and non-detective stories, such as How to Get Away with Murder, Fleabag, Killing Eve, Jessica Jones, or more importantly, I May Destroy You, a drama BBC series written and created by Michaela Cole. The latter covers a similar emotion territory to The Promising Young Woman, the trauma of rape. In the case of The Promising Young Woman, it is the rape of the main character's friend, Nina. In I May Destroy You, it is its main character, Arabella. The two characters in the two pieces of work are very different, but some qualities are similar.
Mom, what's this?
What do you mean?
This gift.
It's your birthday, Cassie.
Oh. Yeah.
The rape casts a long shadow on their ability to function in society. Cassie drops out of her medical school, and Arabella is unable to write a novel, loses her publisher, and loses it all, really.
Put that on. What? Change. We have to cover our tracks. Change our clothes.
Why have you got this?
Terry, why do you think we've been coming here every weekend? I thought you were mentally ill.
She appears to be heading for a total disaster like Cassie in Promising Young Woman, scheming an actual physical violent revenge. The significant difference between the two works is that in I May Destroy You, the female characters' destructive fantasies stay where they belong in the world of fantasy. Promising Young Woman's narrative takes Casey out of the fantasy into the series of highly destructive gestures which spill out of a metaphorical revenge.
I was so sad to leave, you know. I wanted to be a doctor my whole life. But lately I've been feeling like I might want to get back into it.
of language and stage encounters into actual criminal activities. And then she dies too, which for me is the film's most significant flaw. It is here where the issues around promising young women become insurmountable. The narrative replicates the familiar trope of the film noir narrative, with the femme fatale needing to be either domesticated or dead. Conversely, the finale of I May Destroy You is a triumphant sublimation of the anger and the pain, which the work presents as being achieved through intersectional friendship, through talking, through work, through forgiveness, and most importantly for the female protagonist, through the process of her creation, her writing, the process of storytelling, and the defiant refusal to succumb to the demands of patriarchal storytelling with neat endings and close narratives. Most importantly, Arabella is not killed off by her writers, nor does she carry out her destructive revenge plans. The title significantly says, I may destroy you. She may, but she doesn't have to. And ultimately, she does not destroy. She creates successfully. Cassie, Cassandra, named after the Greek prophetess who could see bleak future, carries out her gloomy and violent, morbid fantasies of revenge and destroys much, including herself in the process. The final resolution offers a familiar punishment to the subversive and dangerous heroine of the narrative.
Stop! Stop fucking moving! Stop fucking moving!
Please? I don't want to die! I don't want to die!
The film's ending, therefore, undermines the interesting effort of Promising Young Woman, making the work more patriarchal than it would ever care to acknowledge.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Right, I'll stop presenting, and I hope you'll all, yes, join me in giving a great, virtual round of applause for Agnieszka for that incredibly wide-ranging talk, not only conceptually and in terms of film style. We had film noir, documentary cinema, art cinema, Hollywood cinema, contemporary British TV. But in terms of the methods used as well, I mean, you talked about your academic writing there, and of course your practice-based research as well. So I suppose while I'm giving people a moment to think of whatever questions you want to put to Agnieszka, I'd very much. Oh, I better stop recording as well. Just 1 second. So the